everyone. Welcome to Super Soul Solutions. For today's show, where you will learn about the first human and extraterrestrial interstellar treaty conference that took place in Exeter, England back in 1961. In this convention and following conventions, you will also hear about in future shows, human beings, along with at least 100 extraterrestrial species, had to scientifically prove that they were indigenous to Earth in order to maintain their rights to Earth as their, quote, home, unquote, planet. A pretty big deal. My guest today is JoAnn Richards, a journalist and executive director of the educational nonprofit Earth Defense Headquarters. JoAnn's husband, Captain Mark Richards, U.S. Navy, and Mark's father, Ellis Lloyd Richards, Jr., U.S. Air Force Major, were soldiers in a top-level military performed intelligence operations since World War II. Many special operations included on-world and off-world contact with various humanoid and non-humanoid species. So in this show, JoAnn will share fascinating and eye-opening stories of meetings and engagements with different species, starting with Raptor Prince Naga Draconis of the Imperial Fleet and Captain Loyd Richards, Jr., who conspired together to bring both their indigenous species together with a goal to work in alliance and no longer be enemies. And for the picture of these raptors, folks, think the velociraptors that you saw in the Jurassic World movie, which, by the way, the raptors themselves financed to begin to get humans used to more friendly dragons. At that convention, at least 100 species were in attendance, along with the who's who's list of the world. The logistics, secrecy, and safety were a huge deal. Imagine each species having different needs, food requirements, and many needing unique self-contained environments, especially our 5 sentient ocean species. Well-known architect who created the concept of the geodesic dome, Buckminster Fuller, designed many of these unique environments for the convention. Richards oversaw the security for this entire conference. Gosh, talk about herding cats, literally. Wait till you hear about the upright walking feline and leonine species. So the list of attendees included royalty, top officials, and many well-known scientists in all areas of academic expertise. So with that introduction, I welcome you, JoAnn.
Hi there.
Hi.
How are you?
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm awesome. Okay.
You always are. You're always awesome. I know.
Okay, so we're going to start off today by me asking you this question. So Can you describe the purpose of the first Interstellar Treaty Convention that took place in Exeter in 1961 and some of the famous people invited from around the world? In other words, the purpose of it, more or less.
Sure. Well, first of all, I learned that it was suggested by aliens because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they were quite worried about us humans setting off nuclear devices in the atmosphere. And they wanted us to learn and understand that there is a broader community beyond just us humans on Earth. They warned us if we, kept using nuclear devices to settle our disputes, we would destroy our own planet. They let us know they'd been studying us for thousands of years, and they wanted to see if we could relate to each other, humans and non-humans, as sentient beings, because most non-humans do not see us as sentient beings because their civilizations are so advanced. So part of the reason for I know. And we think we're all that.
And we think we're so arrogant, right?
I know.
Okay.
Well, it was a social experiment to see how humans would react with interact with the aliens, because a lot of the humans that attended the conference maybe knew about aliens, but they'd never seen them themselves. And then Mark and his English girlfriend, they were 7 and 8, something like that. They were 2 human children that were allowed to hang out with alien children who had come with their parents who were ambassadors. And so, it was the other part of the social experiment was like, well, see if the kids can get along with the aliens. And they had lots of committee meetings about, would they let us go out in space? Would they sell us their used spacecraft? Would they be allowed to kidnap humans? Would we be allowed to, maybe how far we could go out into space? Would we be allowed to defend the Earth? So lots going on, but it was, there'd been many treaties, since probably the 30s, and a lot of them had already been broken. So they were trying to, establish one big treaty, to see if everybody could get along, basically. And yes, the attendees, there were heads of state. So you had political leaders, you had, I don't know how many royal people, but there were heads of state, whether they were military and political. You had UN leaders, you had lots of scientists there. I know Carl Sagan was there, Buckminster Fuller was there, and the whole conference was organized. Well, it was authorized by President Kennedy and the British Prime Minister. And as you said, Mark's dad was asked to, he was asked to help organize it, and he was in charge of security. So there was lots going on, and it was a fascinating time, apparently. Mark loved being there.
Oh, that's so cool. I just love this story. And Vice President Johnson also, wasn't he there?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, President Kennedy did not attend, but Vice President Johnson, President Kennedy.
Right.
Yeah.
So cool. This is so cool. And of course the kids get along.
Oh, they got along great. Mark loved playing
right?
with, it's like, it was just playing with kids. He didn't think of it as like, oh, they're aliens. Ooh, they don't look like me. Ooh, he just had fun playing with the alien children. It's like, he says, I was just being a boy.
Right, which in this case, folks, there's a picture on the shout out, and will be in the future YouTube. You'll see pictures of these species that Mark was so kind to hand draw, and he and JoAnn gave us permission to use these pictures, so you'll get a sense of this. So now, how many species attended this first convention, and where were all these species housed in England? Because they had to be hidden from the masses, right? You can't have the locals seeing this stuff.
No, and the RAF was very good at keeping the civilians away from the places that they were staying. So what's interesting is there were like about 100 species that attended that first one. And the opening and closing ceremonies were held at Buckfast Abbey in a little, village of Buckfast, I think it's called. I've been there, and it's like right in the middle of town. So, and I don't know how, small it was back in 1961. And again, back in 1961, England wasn't, as crowded as it is now. So you could get around, and, they could just make it so that you didn't see stuff, and they could just close off an area and keep people out. But the Raptors that we'll talk about, they stayed at a place called Castle Drogo. So a lot of these committee meetings and a lot of different meetings were held. It's all in the southern part of England. So they made use of airfields and places that were close to the ocean for the ocean-going species that were going to come, the field for like things that were going to land in a spaceship. There's one village that has a dimensional portal, and I've been there too. And so some interdimensional species were going to enter through that, dimensional portal. So lots of, so this took, like Devon, Cornwall, I don't know how much over in Cornwall, but all along the southern coast, you had different places because not all of the species could hang out together. Some of them a lot of them didn't get along, so you weren't going to have two enemy species like staying at the same place. But the government would just rent somebody's big manor house or a castle or whatever and, close it off to the public. And that was that. Nobody, I don't know if they asked questions, but, it's just how you did it. So.
Well, and so many of those places, like you mentioned, I looked them up on the map, and they're very isolated, like at the end of points and things like that. So
right.
Was the English royal family hosting this event for the Raptors, since Prince Naga Draconis' family line comes from the British Isles, I found out, on the Jurassic coast in southern England that covers 96 miles.
Right.
And when they themselves walk right there. They go into this reverence of their ancestry, and there's been many fossils and footprints of their kind found. So, how is that allowed by the Queen and all that, the connection there?
I'm not sure. That's one thing I've never asked Mark. Why did they pick England? But maybe it was because of that. But again, there were other species coming, so it wasn't like they were catering to what the raptors wanted. So I'll have to ask that question, why they chose England, for one thing, because I don't know. But like you said, Naga's line came from that southern coast area, and one of the field trips that Mark and the kids took was to go down there, and the especially the raptor children that were with him, they just love exploring that part and seeing where their ancestors had been from. And yeah, there's a lot of evidence there that dinosaurs roamed that part of the world. But I don't think the British royal family, I don't think you would say they hosted it. It's like I know Prince Philip was involved, and I don't know if he was. Well, I know he was head of their space program. So I don't know if he was back then or not. I'm not sure when he became the head of it. But and the Queen. I mean, they all knew about this. All the heads of state obviously know about this. But I'm sure the Queen would have not attended that event. But Prince Philip was there, and Prince Charles was at least at the opening ceremony. But you're never going to get him to admit that. But no. And it was organized by the military leaders, as far as I know. Mark's dad's Rich was involved with inviting a lot of these people. So, he got to talk to them and convince them that it was a really good idea for everybody to sit down and talk. And it was a good experience.
By the way, I just want the audience to be clear that Mark's father's nickname was Rich. It's not that he's rich.
No. Yeah, they called him Rich because his last name is Richards, and his military nickname was called the Dutchman. So.
Yeah, he was one kick-ass dude, let me tell you. Whew.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he was.
So in terms of Mark's family, is he from royal lineage? Because I do remember Mark stating to me once that one time he was visiting Queen Elizabeth and was sitting on her lap talking to her as a little kid, of course. So what's Mark's lineage line?
Well, actually, he was with the Queen Mom, so Queen Elizabeth's mother.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure he's met the Queen. He has worked in military capacities, obviously as an adult with Prince Philip. But he has had tea with the Queen Mom, so that was delightful. But Mark's lineage, I'm not sure about his mother's off the top of my head, but his father's lineage is, his father's mom was of some high-level British families. I know the last name Peacock comes to mind, and I guess that means something in England. And his dad's side was from Germany, so there's, Germany was, once a country of all these little princedoms. There's a lot of German princes all over the place. And so Mark's lineage is a German princedom from the Rhineland area and they got defeated by the Prussians. So I think a lot of them went to like maybe the Netherlands and to Belgium. So a lot of those royal families, came from, like where Mark's family was. So he's if he was if they were still a princedom or whatever, he would be a German prince, technically.
Yeah. I know. Those lineages in DNA are a big deal. So, how and when did Mark Richards, your husband, first meet the Raptors? And again, people think the Jurassic World movie. And which Raptors did Mark get introduced to? So kind of paint us a picture of that meeting.
Sure. When Mark was born in 1953, 2 months to the day, 2 months later, a contingency of raptors came to the Marin County, and in the Marin Water District, they did like a naming blood brother type ceremony with him, like picture the Lion King, where they raise up the kid. the baby lion who's going to be the future king. So that's what they do with Mark, and he has a scar on his wrist that is from, probably Naga's claw and then doing some blood brother thing. Mark's dad had met Naga the year before because a Raptor contingency in their spacecraft had arrived at Hamilton Air Force Base in Novato, California. So Mark's dad met him first, and they started, talking and having dealings and working together. And then Mark was born the following year. So that's when technically Mark first met Naga, even though I don't think he remembers it. But who knows? His memory is better than mine. Officially, they met at the Exeter conference because obviously Naga was there as an ambassador for his race, and two of his children, Linka and Craig, were there. And I think she was like a young teen at that time, and Craig was probably a little younger, or they might, because he's always told me they were like from the same clutch of eggs, so they might have been the same age. So they were a few years older than Mark, and Mark and Titania were taken to Drogo Castle where the Raptors were staying. And I've been there. It's a castle, but it's not a medieval castle. The first guy, the British guy who opened a big grocery store chain in England, he built this home as a castle, so it was his private home. Anyway, you park and you walk across this huge lawn, and so Mark remembers walking across this huge lawn, and these two he sees his dad and Prince Naga coming across the lawn. So okay, his dad's coming toward him with a dinosaur, and then these two younger dinosaurs are coming up to their dad and being very curious, and so his dad gives them permission to go over and meet the humans. And I love the story because, Mark and Linka met, and, they have very sharp claws. So she tucked her claws into her palm, and, they said hello to each other basically. And they did kind of a fist bumping thing because otherwise, you can't really shake hands or you might get, and then they like to sniff us or sniff whoever, to get the scent. And if they really like you, they might lick you to show them, show everybody that they're friends and that kind of stuff. So Mark has fond memories of that meeting, and that was the beginning of them becoming friends. And, he went on to do military missions with Craig, and Princess Linka has gone on to she's now the empress of their race. So fascinating. Just, we could talk about raptors for hours.
Yeah, I know. We could. Think about that. Mark was your childhood playmates, right? With the empress now of their entire, race. And then also. Yeah, and then,
like I said, they went on several field trips while the different meetings. They went to some of the meetings, but they mostly were going on field trips and being taught by, I think there were probably some raptor sorceresses who were there, or at least one, so like chaperones. You had really cool chaperones who were teaching you about science and about space as you're going to these field trips, and the kids are telling him, it's like, yeah, we've known you humans have been going out in space for years, and because we'd been going to space since the 50s, so it's pretty remarkable how much they knew about us.
Oh yeah, and one of the amazing things, folks, is up to this point, if I have this right, JoAnn, there was a little it's very hard for the little ones because they were used to eating us as food, and this was one of the first times they met a human where they weren't allowed to eat.
Like, oh, do I lick you because I'm telling everybody you're my lunch, or because I want to get, be friends with you? Yeah. And, it's interesting because Mark said at the castle, and again, I've been to the castle, so I can envision these things. There's a grand dining room, and off the dining room is a lovely, patio area. And they had a big, banquet, or a huge big dinner where, they're probably going to have a meeting that night. Who knows exactly. But anyway, they had a dinner, but they had to have the humans eat indoors and the raptors had to go outdoors because all they eat is live food, and it gets pretty messy. So, most humans don't want to watch that.
Exactly. And then raptor children have unlimited energy too. They're like
they
like
do. They're
pistons.
constantly
It's
running.
like,
They're
like crazy.
They love to run, and they're pretty amazing. It's an amazing species, to say the least.
Yeah, and as JoAnn said, Mark had mentioned that the raptors, even the ones like Naga, who no longer wanted to eat every human they found, were not yet allies at the time of this convention, particularly. Like, we're talking about the race in 1961. Kind of shaky comrades, right? Weren't we?
Right. I mean, they had started to become our allies back after, because that's why Naga had gone to Hamilton Air Force Base and met with Rich and other military leaders, because the Empress at the time was Naga's grandmother, but she was aging and she was grooming her daughter, Naga's mom, to become the Empress. So the mom had sent Naga there as an ambassador because they felt it was, time to start seeing if they could work with the humans. And Empress Lincoln now, still feels it's in their best interest to work with us. And so, they started that ally relationship back in the early 50s. And so it probably wasn't perfected, obviously, by 1961. And, they've always looked on us like pets. It's like
exactly.
They agree that we're sentient beings, but, again, all these other species are so much more advanced and older than our civilization. Then, it's amazing why they would. They obviously don't see us as equals, which is fine. They're older and wiser.
Well, and plus, most of the people listening have been miseducated in thinking that dinosaurs were stupid and little brains and all this stuff. So I know in their minds they're going, and some were, but I know in their minds they're going, how do these beings even communicate? And Naga, being an ambassador, he's a very amazing being, and being an ambassador, he was willing to have surgery. Do you want to talk about that so they get a sense of that?
Well, sure. The more elite of their, they definitely have some kind of caste system, but the more elite of their species, and I don't know exactly at what age, but they are allowed to have, it's like total of 4 surgeries on their voice boxes and their vocal cords so that they can speak human languages. I think Mark said, back in that time, it's like a Naga could speak, 14 to 16 different languages. But I mean, Mark can speak Raptor, and it's amazing. It's very interesting to listen to, and it's very guttural and hissy, kind of like German. So they can speak German really well, but they can speak lots of different human languages. And so by the time Mark met them, he might have been able to, the children that were there might have had some of the operations, if not all of them. But also, one thing we learned from this conference is that many of the species, if they couldn't communicate through voice, and a lot of them couldn't, with each other, but they would use the grays as translators, or a lot of species have what we call elementals or fairy beings with them, even from space, and they would, everybody's elementals would talk to each other, and they would translate that way. So amazing.
Right. Plus a few AI, plus those species that are telepathic or psionic, plus translator devices. Right. So you had a bunch of options. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Mark, they came across, there was a little AI creature that, became, I guess, friends with him. And then, there were elementals around, and, when Mark was with the children, I mean, they didn't use the grays, but they had elementals, and they could use telepathy to talk to each other. And it was amazing the adults were really amazed at how well the children got along, and, Titania with her magical gifts and Linka having the same types of magical gifts, so they could interdimensionally shift pretty quickly, and, nobody would see where the children had gone, or, it was amazing. So, the children just had no problem getting along and communicating with each other.
Most children don't. Even human children, most don't until they've been, conditioned So,
right.
So what do you think
right.
the Raptors think about us humans, especially at first? It wasn't very flattering, was it?
Well, and I think too, like you said, they used to eat humans on a regular basis, and once Mark's dad started working with Naga, he was teaching him that eating us on a regular basis is not a good idea. So he really helped institute that practice that they stop eating us. What was I going to say? What do they think of us? They think of us as pets. And I think they do acknowledge that we are sentient beings, but they also, I think they think we're silly because, we're using all this machinery, and, it's funny because they don't necessarily invent a lot of technology. They'll borrow or steal a lot of technology, but they're very technologically advanced. But, so they're not happy that we have fouled the earth and taken such poor care of it, because this is their home world. So while they're willing to work with us, they're not happy with us that we've done such a poor job of stewardship over our planet, because it was lush and jungly when they were here, and they would like to see it that way again. But that doesn't mean they want to kill us all off and take over or make us their slaves. But it's interesting. They're willing to work with us, but they don't see us as equals by any means, as far as I can tell.
Well, they have the hierarchy, too, and kind of a multiple caste system thing. I know that they originally thought, well said, by the way, JoAnn, I know that they originally thought that humans foul up their own nests, which they found stupid and disgusting, like you said, and that we cause so much overcrowding and pollution, much like the oceanic species hate us for. And they also, the raptors, I remember Mark saying, they think way ahead, like advanced species are supposed to, right? And they think about and they keep their tech off planet. So they keep the connection to nature for the most part. Is that what you know too? Right.
They're very ecologically sound, and when they're building a base here on Earth, they don't build buildings, everything's underground, and they're doing everything naturally and slowly. So I don't know exactly how they do that, but if they need to manufacture something, they do it off planet. Now, I would say that, their custom had been, to kidnap people here and there, but they're not mass kidnappers like other species are. And sometimes, Naga would have a harem of lots of females, lots of different species. So, that was just their custom. It's just, they're not necessarily monogamous. So.
Right. And we'll get into that in a minute. I know that I think Mark stated, if I remember this right, that he said, for our new, quote, dragon friends, they thought regarding humans not being able to smell properly marked a species as being low on the evolutionary ladder, not to mention being sadly cheated on the developmental scale.
That's probably quite accurate. Yeah. I forgot any of that.
Perfect. But
yeah. It's funny. Go ahead.
No, you go, hon. No, I insist.
Well, it's some of the funny things, like you and I know. It's like they do like to have a lot of fun. So, and the Raptors, they have bases here on the planet. Nobody interacts openly with civilians, but they do have bases here, but they do like to have fun, and they like nice things. So they'll commandeer like a shopping mall late at night in Tokyo, for example, or, it doesn't always be Tokyo, and go shopping. And they'll go to Las Vegas or Macau late at night and go gambling. But a lot of species go gambling. So it's not just the raptors. A lot of species love to go gambling. And the wonderful thing, and I didn't pull it up anywhere, but one of the things I love about them, for as dangerous as they look, they're some of the most spiritual beings that I've ever heard about, because you've probably heard me give the quote, but a raptor senator at the conference we'll talk about in another interview, he gave the most beautiful quote about their connection to the universe and how everything is infinite and wonderful and, you know, one with each other, even if you can't see each other or even if you can't hear. But, you know, their connection to the universe is so far beyond where I'm at. It's just amazing. And you wonder, I just sit in awe, and I pretty much cry every time I read that quote to an audience. It's just amazing how spiritual they are. You know, I've had people ask me, it's like, they're not religious, definitely not religious, but they're very spiritual, and it's amazing. And, you know, they love Mother Earth.
Yeah. Oh, they're like one with it. Like, exactly, believe in oneness and respect for nature and others. Well, you know about cultural rules.
Family, fornication, food, and fun. And they're big family. Yeah. They're big. They're big on family. Let me tell you. You know, yes, they have harems. They have lots of offspring, but they believe in education and they believe in discipline, and you don't embarrass your parents, or you might get pulled up by your tail and thrown out the window or banged against the wall, because they're tough. And if you're tough enough, you'll survive that. And if you won't, oh well, you weren't tough enough. But, you know, they're highly educated, and they have, you know, poets and writers and scientists. And, you know, you've heard
operas.
Mark describe, they do these elaborate operas that go on for hours, you know. and Craig's a hero in some of those.
Like
I think
heroic.
Mark's been mentioned. Yeah, they're heroic. And, you know, both the females and the males go into the military. And so it's not like, you know, the military is only a male thing, because you've got some female heroes and, you know, warriors in the military. And I don't know that it's demanded or expected of them, but, you know, they do fight along with the men or the males, and they're built for running. So they're constantly running and staying in shape and hunting. And, you know, their sense of smell is amazing, as you've mentioned. Ours is not. Like I've already said,
run,
you know,
45 miles per hour for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. So, you know, like, You know, one of the cutest things, if I could share this. Okay, people, you all got to get this vision going, okay? You know, like David Bowie's Let's Dance.
Let's dance.
Well, Mark says all the Raptor females get together and do line dancing to that.
Oh, yeah. It's very seductive, apparently.
You're right. Yeah.
Very seductive.
It's a great visual, you know?
It's like, I've often teased him. It's like, okay, well, who's line dancing for you? But yeah, you can just, if I ever hear that song, it's just like that just starts going through my head. And yeah, they have a good time. But you know, they're also, and people ask me, well, how do they use a computer, or how do they control a ship? All mind based.
It's consciousness assisted. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't, you know, they're talking to the computer, or they're thinking to the computer, or to the spaceship. They're not typing things with their claws. And in a fun thing, you know, it's like, people think I'm silly when I start talking about this stuff, but like the females love to paint their claws. You know, they'll have elaborate manicures and get all these little designs painted on their claws. It's, you know, I love the fun side stuff to hear about them. And just know that, you know, they're still our allies. They're still our allies.
Jewelry too. Yeah.
They do. They love jewelry. They love silks. You know, they don't like to wear clothes. You know, they prefer to run around naked, but they do love the accessories. That's what it would be. You know, they love the accessories. So
yeah. That's so
but, you know,
perfect.
And the bigger thing too is, like, they are still our allies. You know, there are, and I don't want to get into the dark side of anything, but, you know, there are enemies that come here. They're still helping us fight the enemies that nobody can really talk about.
Yes, they are. So, and you know, one of the unusual qualities of the Nagas is they can't be psionically controlled by the other psionic species. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you can't really mind control them or take over. They're very strong.
Yeah. Okay, so before we, I have you describe just a few more species because we're just whizzing through this. I want you to explain to people, because they're probably trying to figure out like the dinosaurs and the this and that, the unusual thing that occurred, okay, where the Raptors, Naga, and the fleet were off.
Oh, they left?
Yeah, and exploring the black hole to accumulate energy from, and then came back. Can you explain that to them?
Well, yeah, and it's funny because you remember some of that. It's like I don't remember that part of it, but, and Mark's gone into long explanations of this, and the science kind of goes over my head. But in a very simplified version, in a nutshell, many raptors had left the planet millions of years ago to colonize space, and they've done a wonderful job of that. But somewhere out there, they kind of got stuck in this time displacement thing at the event horizon, and, I'm doing a poor job of explaining it. He's probably written it down somewhere that took chapters to explain it. But they thought they'd only been gone from Earth maybe a few hundred years or maybe a few thousand years. They'd been gone for millions of years. So when they came back, when they came back and saw that, we were not rodents any longer, I think we were probably more like rodents when they were here before, and we, were people and we were kind of running things and stuff. That really did shock them. Now, on, I guess the good side is they have a very elaborate and widespread empire out in space. So, it's not like they just terraformed one planet out there. They've got planets and moons and yada, yada, yada. They've pretty much got a huge territory out there. So, and they were, and while they were gone, or at some point, 65 million plus years ago, a big asteroid hit like the Yucatan Peninsula and pretty much wiped out everything here on the planet. Their cousin species, which was very similar to a Naga species, another kind of raptor, very similar species, they, had a base on Mars. There was a base on the moon. Some of them lived underground. Some of them survived all that, and they evolved into what we call now the reptoids. So they're basically kind of cousins. They're distantly related to the raptors. They're enemies, and they've evolved so they look more humanoid. They walk upright. They don't have a tail, but they still have 3 toes and claws, and they can bite you and chew on you and chew you apart, type of stuff. They are our enemies. They are the raptors' enemies. They're very involved with terrorism and ISIS and a lot of nasty things that are going on the planet right now.
Yeah, and African bases. And folks, there's a picture that'll be on our YouTube and on those of you that received the shout out of what reptoids look like. So the reptoids basically look down at the raptors because the reptoids see themselves as having million years more evolutionary advancement than the raptors. Raptors only have 6,000 years missing, right? And so there's this kind of like war going on too, right, between them?
Yeah, and their agendas are different. They want to enslave us. They want to take over. They still argue that, they should be in charge of the planet. And there have been other operations that Mark and his dad have been on where they had a plan in place to start taking over the planet, and it got squashed. But again, recently, they are involved with, current events and terrorism attacks. And, you hear of a weird attack at a shopping mall, and, you don't really see pictures of the perpetrators, but, the reptoids have been behind it. And, they're very capable of mind control, and they're very involved with mass kidnappings or kidnappings in general, and lots of people going missing. And, could be introducing viruses for all we know. But
yes, ma'am. You're very right on about that.
Yeah, aren't I?
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, the reptoids are not our friends.
No, not really. Okay, so give just a couple really, really brief descriptions of other species that attended. Like, how about the, go ahead.
I was going to say, because I know we're already almost running out of time, for gosh sakes. There was one of Mark's other childhood friends that he made there was called a gastrocell. He was one unit of a communal community who had come there like with a message. And as a single unit, he looks like this beautiful blue, oily balloon, and just a beautiful creature. And they had to encase him in a bubble and then feed methane and ammonia through a tube into the bubble so that that's what he ate. Now, when they're together as in their community, they look like clouds. So that was pretty cool. Mark could talk to him through, telepathy, and Mark and Titania and some of the others, they would go astral traveling at night when they were supposed to be sleeping. And, you could see that they would go as a group. And, Mark got to meet like other members of his community because they had they were either vacationing or they were just hanging out like near Jupiter or Saturn or whatever. So they had some lovely astral traveling journeys. So that was what, and they arrived at the conference. Their ambassadors arrived at the conference through that portal I was talking about. There's a keep left from a castle in a village that's not far from where Buckfast Abbey is, and I've been there, and you can feel the vortex energy there. It's amazing. Anyway, that's how they arrived, through that vortex. There was also, there was lots of humanoid types there, and the OCEANICs, he was fascinated with them. So you have one species, if you've ever seen the movie The Abyss, those lovely creatures that you could kind of see through. And anyway, that's kind of what like the Nereids are like, and they live in, I don't know what part of the ocean, but they live, deep in the ocean, and they're interdimensional beings. And when they want to, maybe come to the surface or even on land, they have to take the body of like some recently deceased being. So like they might, if they want to come on land, they might take over a body of like a child that just drowned or somebody. But also they can shape shift, I guess. So like if you want to see a mermaid out in the ocean, they could make you think you're looking at a mermaid. So they're pretty cool, and it's that's like kind of like where the concept of King Neptune came from. So the young girl of that species, her father was like the leader, the king or whatever. But she took on the body of like a recently drowned little girl, and they fed her oatmeal until she got used to eating. But she was lovely, and they became one of their friends. And then the other oceanics, there's a species that looks like dolphins. They're called polymorphs. There's an octopus-like species that doesn't like us, but I guess some octopus are not necessarily an octopus. There's like a giant squid-like thing, and there's also one that Mark became good friends with. They look like a lobster, but when they have to wear a biosuit to be on Earth, then it's like a walking crab. So, but complete with weapons and everything. But they, like you mentioned, they had to create different environments for some of these beings so they could attend the meetings. So they had to build elaborate tanks, and they had to be aware of like what kinds of things each species needed for food. The logistics of this conference must have been a nightmare, or fascinating, depending on how you want to look at it. But you had to which species do we need to keep apart, and what do we need to feed that one, and what do we need to feed that one? It was amazing. It was amazing.
Exactly.
So those were some of them. And
that's a great descriptions, by the way. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And there were also, like you said, there were other, and we won't go into a lot of detail, but you had some Sasquatch there who were like hired as bodyguards for certain beings. You had several humanoids, and there were several gray species there. So lots of species, and Mark learned that the scariest looking ones were usually the most friendly. Yeah. So.
Well, what about the merchants and traders of the galaxy?
Oh, the Canonians. I mean, it's spelled like Canisians, but we call them Canonians. And it's funny because
I love those guys.
I know. They were there because it was approved for them after the conference to build a base in Australia. But they're basically this lovely hound dog species that are just simply merchants. They've been interacting with humans on the planet for thousands of years. They love to help us. They would love right now to be our friends and openly, interact with us because they're business people. They would love more clients. But right now they have this huge base somewhere in Australia, and they export goodies. They export chocolate and bling and jewelry and whatever out to space because the different species just love it. So they're making big bucks, however the interchange works. But they're getting rich off of us somehow. So that's pretty cool.
Very
and
ambitious.
I know there were very ambitious, yes. And I'm sure there were some cats there. In the parts that I've read, didn't really talk about those, but I hear more about them like in the next conference. But just lots of different species, and he was fascinated. I know he hung out and watched all these species enter for the opening ceremonies, and then he and Titania and the other children hung out in one of the balconies in this, the big abbey, the main like cathedral type. It's probably not as big as a cathedral, but it's a pretty big, church sanctuary building. So they were hanging out in the balcony watching the opening ceremonies, and I think the opening ceremonies were held at midnight. So it was pretty amazing.
Can you imagine? No sleep, no anything, And did anyone uninvited show up?
Well, I know two things. Like one night when there's a small military castle, like near the entrance of the bay near Dartmouth, and there's a military academy there, and Torquay is nearby. Anyway, I've been there. So they were going to have a meeting there one night, and Mark and the kids, or at least Mark and Titania, I'm not sure who all was there, but it might have been all the kids for all I know. There was a fawn that showed up, and the fawns are like the satyr, or half deer, half goat, and half human, like you see from the movie Narnia. That's what it reminds me of. A cloning experiment of the reptoids that I wouldn't say it went bad or anything, but so they were not considered a sentient being, so they were not invited to the conference, and they were not happy about that. And also at the Dartmouth Castle, an outlawed group of mantids came to have a meeting with Rich and Naga and stuff, so they weren't really invited either. Maybe other mantids were technically invited, but this outlawed group weren't. But they were actually the good guys, and that's how Mark got to know some mantid beings, because the princess was there and he loved her face. He was fascinated with her jaw and her big crunching ability. It's like, you had a crush on the princess, huh?
No pun intended, because they can crush your arm in half in 1 second.
Exactly.
Mantid, you guys think 6 foot tall,
Yeah.
Mantid insectoids, okay? Just so you get a sense of all these things.
Exactly.
Okay. I feel bad for that fawn. Anyway.
I know. And I'm not sure if they ended up letting his father go to the conference. I'd have to look back at all the notes. But, the kid was nice. And they have a name for him, but I can't remember what it was. I mean, he had a name, and Mark has mentioned it. I just don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So
I can't tell you folks how many pages of Mark's material that JoAnn and I have read. So I'm amazed that we're remembering any of this, right? I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of pages.
Yeah, and Marilee has been kindly over to my house and has spent hours helping me scan this stuff so that now it's available digitally. So thank you for all those hours you spent helping me. Yes.
Of course. I was selfish. I wanted to know. I mean, Mark writes about 600 to 800 pages per 1 day at a treaty. Okay. So I'm like,
I know. Well, the exit treaty, the exit treaty report's only 1,200 pages, or 2,000. The Iran conference is thousands of pages, and I don't think he ever finished it. So. And I know you wanted me to talk about the outcome of this treaty. There's 2 things I take away from it, and as I said before, the Canonians we're allowed to establish a base in Australia. So that's pretty cool. And they're looking forward to the day where we can openly. My cats want their dinner. They're looking forward to the day when we can openly have commerce with them. Now, the big thing that I keep mentioning is that open communication between civilians and ETs or aliens or non-humans was banned for 50 years. So 1961, and then there was a mini conference in 2011 when Princess, Kate and William from England got married. So right after that, there was another mini conference or a big meeting, whatever you want to call it, in Paris, and they renewed that part of the treaty. Still they're going to keep banning it for another 50 years. So, you have projects like SETI, who are the government's front saying, oh yeah, we're going to try and establish contact, and the military's been in contact with the species forever, for a long time. And still, it's like we could all get in trouble. Pardon me?
Yeah. I said that's a good point to explain to people because, they had the first big treaty in 1961. 61. So then we're going to, part 2, we're going to talk about the one in Persepolis, where the front, where you get all the important people showing up, was the Shah of Iran's birthday. And just like
it was like the birthday of the
wedding.
Monarchy. Yeah, it was the birthday, the 2,500-year birthday of the monarchy, or the anniversary of the monarchy. So they put on an elaborate several-day party. But yeah, I mean,
and
like
underneath
treaties
is going on.
Yeah, and under the guise of that, you've got all these meetings going on, and species trying to sabotage the conference, and yeah, that was amazing. But it's interesting because the aliens have been coming here for a long time, and our political leaders have been meeting with them, since the 30s and 40s. So, but in a lot of those treaties, they had to keep trying because a lot of those treaties had already been broken. And even at the Exeter conference, you had people making side deals with each other, elite groups, the beginning of the New World Order stuff. You had all these groups making side deals and making their own deals with the aliens. And even now, and over the years, it's like you had all these, these countries, like they're going to make different deals with different alien groups. And at any one moment, Russia might work with this race, and now they're working with this race. And, China might be working with this race this year and another race this, so different side deals and have been going on for years, and it's amazing and a very complex issue. But
it is.
The good news is there are species who do want to communicate with us and do want to get along with us. So there's a lot of species who don't want that to happen. But
yeah. Well, we're cleaning house, and this is what I wanted the civilians to, even though I'm a civilian, folks, but, all you people out there to just start realizing that all this has been going on under your feet, and you will never understand political or any other things until you get the whole big picture of this. So I know it's probably a lot, but it's a really fun, amazing subject. And also the Falklands War in 1981, we didn't have a treaty because it was actually an ET war. So people were preoccupied with that. So, and then I remember Mark was saying, well, we don't really do the big, kind of like what you were mentioning, we don't do the big treaties anymore because of the satellites. It's pretty hard to do things anymore with all the surveillance of everything,
Right.
It's hard to.
Yeah, but they have all these meetings. So like the Kyoto Treaty Conference, that was another one of these mini conferences. Like when you have these something like economic summits, you can be sure there's probably aliens there too having these meetings and stuff. And I think, when we talk about the Iran conference, there's a timeline of things, and, there was a timeline set for setting a date for disclosure, which was like 2031 is when they thought they might just set a date. And obviously a bunch of us are trying to move that up.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly. So thank you so much, JoAnn. So why don't you please share? You just wrote a new book.
Oh,
you are also, at the head of the Earth Defense Headquarters. So share with people about that and where they can get information from you.
Okay. Well, Earth Defense Headquarters has two websites. edhca.org and edhq.org. So that's that. And I've just written a book that will very soon be printed called Midlife Magic. It's basically my memoir and, how I have a normal childhood and I got married a million times, and then how I got into the world of weird, as I call it, the magic and the paranormal and elementals and space stuff and just, how my life has totally changed since I met Mark and went down this wonderful rabbit hole to learn about all these awesome topics. So, that's what that's about, and that should be available shortly. And I do have an author page on Facebook, and it's on my LinkedIn. And you can just go on Facebook and pull up my name, and I keep posting stuff about it. So you can get on my mailing list of things, so you'll know exactly when it's going to be out. But it should be out very shortly.
It's very exciting.
Very exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
So
JoAnn is two separate words. You want to spell it for them? So when they type it in?
J-O, capital A-N-N, 2 words, Richards. There's a space between the J-O space A-N-N, yeah. So.
And they'll find you that way.
They will.
Last thing you want to let the audience know, the listeners know at this point in time in history, any advice, anything that comes out for you?
I think, don't live in fear. I always say that, don't live in fear. Some of the stuff we teach with this stuff is scary, but you and I are on the same page. We like to talk about the culture and what the species are like, because I think there needs to be a day where we're all working and walking around together and having tea together. And, I can't wait till I have my property where they can just all come and land and have tea. So, I look forward to a positive, it's like Men in Black, I love the idea of having a positive relationship, because many, it couldn't be open, but I have read through Mark's reports that it is very possible for us to get along with them. And we have so much to learn from different species. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
So.
And it's going on underneath people's noses. So that's why if people become aware and work through it, it's like just like people here, when they have blessed and have the opportunity to travel, they're going to be less biased, less fearful, less scared of the new. So we need to get on with it, because we used to be a galactic civilization, and we're moving back there, folks. So join us in 2 weeks for part 2, when we will talk about the second convention that took place in Persepolis, Iran in 1971, with some amazing stories. And, oh, my God, we could just talk into midnight, couldn't we?
I know, we could. But my cats want dinner. And
I know. Okay.
They're very vocal.
Thanks for joining me, JoAnn. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Marilee. Okay, dear. Take care.
Thanks,
bye, everyone. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.